Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Safi Hilmi bin Jamal Shahili. I am third year student. Before we continue this video, I want to ask, have you watched video from other subspecialties? If you have, thank you, I very appreciate it. And if you have not, you can watch the videos after the video. So, what is forensic anthropology? Forensic anthropology is the examination of human skeletal remains for law enforcement agencies to help with the recovery of human remains, determine the identity of unidentified human remains, interpret trauma, and estimate the time since death. The unidentified remains due to decomposition and mass disasters such as tsunami, earthquake, and even volcano eruption. The importance of forensic anthropology are to identify the ancestry, sex, time at death, height, and the trauma of the human remains. In ancestry determination, there are three approaches that we can use. Firstly, non-metric, then metric, and lastly, DNA analysis. But the most commonly we use the non-metric method. Non-metric method where we study the morphology of the skull. Each trait will give different variations to the morphology of the skull, so we can determine the ancestry from the morphology of the skull. As an example, we can see the eye orbit. European will have angular eye orbit, African will have rectangular eye orbit, and the Asian will have rounded eye orbit. For another example, we can see the nasal width. European will have narrow nasal width, African will have wide nasal width, and the Asian will have medium nasal width. Okay, that's all for my parts. I will pass to my friends to explain more about forensic anthropology. Thank you.
Hi, in this video I'm going to talk about how an individual age and death can be estimated. Forensic anthropologists use skeletal indicators involved in processes of bone reabsorption, deposition, and remodeling, which are time related to estimate age of an individual. There are two categories of age-related changes, which is formative and degenerative. The formative changes are dental eruption and mineralization during growth and development, epiphyseal union of long bones, and cranial suture closure. For degenerative changes is meant by the dental wear and osteoarthritis during aging. There are numerous techniques for estimating age, but neither of them is 100% accurate. Individual variation like genetic and habits and the difference between sample population like nutrition can be the source of error in age estimation. So, choice of methods is limited in incomplete or fragmented remains. Estimating age always will be provided in a range like 10 to 20 years. Bones can be determined age, the time of death, and the manner of death. Different types of bones are used to estimate age according to their age range. Approximate age can be determined in many ways. One way is by the size and the development of the skull. This method is accurate when it comes to the fetuses. Analysis of the frontal or soft spot is another way to try to identify the approximate age of a fetus using the skull. As the skull becomes more developed, the frontals become smaller and eventually become the sutures. As we age, the sutures fill in more and become harder. Second is dental age of humans can also used to determine their age. These are extremely useful in the estimation of age and are preferable over other skeletal methods. Dental development is more reliable technique as an indicator of biological maturity in children that can be used from infancy to late adolescence. Dental age of a child can be determined in two methods, which is stage of eruption and stage of tooth mineralization. Stage of eruption is a visual method that is based on the evaluation of the sequence of teeth eruption in oral cavity, whereas stage of tooth mineralization is a radiograph method of the dentition which is used to determine the stage of dental development of the teeth from initial mineralization of a tooth, crown formation to root apex maturation. Dental aging of an adult can be checked by many factors such as loss of surface of teeth due to wear from opposing teeth, transparency or translucency of root keratin, root reabsorption, color changes and secondary dental deposition. This secondary dental deposition occurs throughout life after completion of root formation. The pulp cavity will reduce in size as age increases. Other than that, comparative age can be determined by looking at the long bones in X-rays. In a child, the area of bone growth is cartilage, and in X-ray, it will appear as clear space and run close to parallel with the bones. In an adult, growth plate has turned completely to a bone, and in X-ray, it will appear as white lines in the same location as the clear space in the child's X-ray. Finally, I am going to talk about the morphological changes in adults that can be used to estimate their age. Age estimation using pubic symphysis gained in attention when there was a need to identify individuals killed in the Second World War. The changes of pubic symphysis start at age 20 and continuing past the age at 65. Todd in 1920 proposed a 10-phase method for analyzing the pubic symphysis to estimate age. After revising Todd's method, Sachi and co-workers created a 6-stage method to separate standard for females and males. Later, auricular surface of ileum was used to estimate age at death, as the age changes seen are relatively well defined and regular. The advantages of auricular surface being used as a parameter for skeletal age assessment is because it has the highest survival rate in archaeologist population and identifiable changes extend beyond the age of 50 when compared to the pubic symphysis. We can also see the changes in sternal rib end of an adult. The rib end are relatively flat at first, but during aging process, the ends became rigid and the cartilage became pitted. So, that's all from me about determination of age at death for subadult and adult. You know that the estimation of height is part of the identification process that is important when dismembered body parts are found. Yes, height estimation can be obtained from the measurement of long bones such as humerus, the upper arm bone, femur, the thigh bone, and tibia, the lower leg bone. If these bones are unavailable, then bones like ulna and radius that can be found in forearm and fibula, the calf bone, also can provide a good range of height. The measurements will be used in regression formula to estimate height, but these calculations are accurate to within 5 centimeters as they do not predict the exact height of an individual. Since height is variable among population and sex, there are different regression formula for different population. Therefore, determining which regression formula to use is an important aspect of an height estimation. It is necessary to know the individual's population and the individual's sex when selecting a formula. There are tables like these to calculate height that forensic anthropologists use as reference. Hope you had fun learning about height determination. Thank you.
Hello guys, my name is Nur Amalia Mitia Abdul Rahim. So I'm going to continue discussing about forensic anthropology, and in my part we are going to focus on two things, which is determination of sex and skeletal trauma. We begin with determination of sex. It means we are going to determine whether the bone that we found at the crime scene is either from a female or a male. The determination can only be seen in adult. I am going to show you guys some of the example of the bones that used for determination of sex. Firstly, we can determine by looking at the skull. This is the difference between the female skull and the male skull. Generally, we can see the male skull appearance is big and rugged, while the female skull is small and smooth. Next, we also can see the differences between the female pelvic bone and the male pelvic bone. Generally, the male pelvic bone is big, thick, and more rugged, while the female pelvic bone is smoother, lighter, and more spacious. Lastly, we can also determine the sex by looking at the sternum. As you can see, the length of sternum in male is longer than the female. Sternum consists of three parts, which is manubrium, body of sternum, and xiphoid process. In male, the body of sternum is 2 times longer than the length of manubrium, while in female, the body of sternum is less than 2 times the length of manubrium. So that's all for determination of sex. Now, I'm going to talk about skeletal trauma. There are 4 types of skeletal trauma, which is projectile trauma, blunt force trauma, sharp trauma, and strangulation. Projectile trauma is caused by the bullets, pellets, arrows, and spears. These are the examples that we can see from the skull that caused by this trauma. The second type is blunt force trauma. It refers to any injury caused by a force that has a wide area of impact on bone. For example, baseball bat, hard surface, pieces of wood, hammer, and so on. These are the types of fracture that may occur. The third one is sharp force trauma. Sharp trauma typically characterized by straight, neat, and clean edge line. It caused by typical sharp instruments such as axe, knife, and chopper knife. So these are the examples that caused by the sharp instrument. The last type of skeletal trauma is strangulation. Strangulation is compression of the neck. One of the example of situation where an action of killing someone by pressing their throat so that they cannot breathe. These are the example where the shape of the bone have changed due to this trauma. That's all from me. Thank you and have a good day.
I'm sure you have heard lots of cases in Malaysia where fires are involved either in buildings or involving in shops when cars are set on fire or when cases where human remains are found in fire. So in all these cases, when the origins of the fire is not known, the forensic experts in terms of fire investigation come in. In Malaysia, the experts are predominantly in the fire and rescue department, bomber, and also a lot of them are also attached to insurance companies or loss adjusters, where they come in after the bomber comes in to conduct their own investigation as well, in order to release claims from insurance. So the main thing that we look at in fire investigation is the origin, where the fire started, and also what caused the fire. These two are very important to build the case surrounding the fire, as to what happened, who did it, how did it move from one place to another, and all of this is conducted scientifically and robustly to make sure that we do not miss anything or send the wrong person to prison. All right, so this analysis would involve a lot of lab analysis where we do analysis in using this instrument called chromatography, where it separates compounds based on their mass and also based on their affinity towards the instrument itself. So it produces like a fingerprint or a DNA of that particular compounds that we are analyzing. So in cases where incendiary fires are involved, incendiary here means fires that are not natural, not because of lightning, not because of accidentally someone threw their cigarette butts on a surface, but this is done with malice intent. The intent is negative. The intent is not good. So this is usually where they use ignitable liquids. These ignitable liquids are liquids such as petrol, kerosene, diesel, turpentine. You always see in the TV where they throw it into the scene and then they lit a match and then they throw it at the scene to cause the fire. So in order for us to say that this fire is incendiary, we need to find this ignitable liquid. So the analysis is done in the lab. So I hope that you enjoy this video and learn as much as possible through your kits. Thank you.
Welcome to today's fire investigation. Let's begin. So, what exactly is the purpose of a fire investigation? Well, in general, it's to determine how the fire started and why the fire behaved the way it did. Data from a fire investigation are key elements in addressing a fire problem. According to the NFPA 921, a scientific and systematic method of analysis are needed to determine the origin and cause of a fire, which is why today I will be briefly going over the basics of a fire investigation. The first point of a fire investigation is to locate the point of origin. Where, how, and why did the fire start? Imagine that you're a fire investigator and you've arrived at the scene of the crime. Essentially, the first thing that you would do is search for the general area of origin of the fire, and from there you can attempt to pinpoint the exact origin from where the fire started. Other points of a fire investigation include determining the fuel used and identifying the ignition source. When an ignition source comes into contact with fuel, it creates, boom, a fire, but not just any fire, specifically the point of origin where the fire started. And last but not least, after the fire investigator has analyzed the crime scene, they then have to determine whether it was an accidental fire or a fire that was incendiary, which means intentionally set. If the fire was classified as an accident, this means that the fire did not involve any criminal or malicious intent. However, if the fire was intentionally set, this means that the fire is considered a crime, specifically arson. So, to recap the purpose of a fire investigation, in general, it's to determine how the fire started and what exactly happened. By determining the cause of fires, fire departments can also take steps to prevent future fires. Hence, the most important reason for a fire investigation, whether the fire was accidental or not, is to prevent future fires.
Mechanism of heat transfer. There's three mechanisms of heat transfer. Firstly, Conduction. Conduction is an actual physical contact between surfaces by heat application. Next, convection. Convection is the transfer of heat through circulating liquids and gases. Lastly, radiation. Radiation is the transmitting of heat energy in the form of electromagnetic wave in all directions from the fire, especially to surfaces that are facing it. Fire pattern. There's two types of fire pattern. Movement pattern and also intensity pattern. Movement pattern. Movement pattern produced by the spreading of plumes, smoke, soot, heat and combustion product. It can be used to trace the fire and smoke pattern back to the origin. There's a lot of type under the movement pattern. Firstly, V-shaped pattern. V-shaped pattern occur when there's intersection of fire plume by vertical surfaces. Circular shape pattern. Circular shape pattern usually occur on the side of tables, shelf, underneath of round tins and waste basket. Lastly, pointer and arrow pattern, or also called as beveling pattern. It is an indicator of fire direction on wood wall stud. It is displayed on a series of combustible elements such as wooden stud. Intensity pattern. Intensity pattern is indicated by the response of material and object to heat. There's a lot of type under the intensity pattern. Firstly, char. Char is a carbonaceous material that has been burned. Next, spalling. Spalling is the breakdown in surface tensile strength of concrete or brick caused by exposure to high temperature. Other than that, calcination. Calcination describes the numerous changes that occur in gypsum wallboard and plaster surfaces during a fire. Next, clean burn. Clean burn produces a clean area adjacent to area darkened by products of combustion. It produced most commonly by direct flame contact or intense radiated heat. Lastly, trailer pattern. Trailer pattern produced by ignitable liquid such as petrol, kerosene and diesel that are intentionally poured from one area to another.
Let's conclude today's fire investigation. Today, we learned about heat transfer through conduction. Good job! So let's review. Heat transfer is the transport of heat energy from one point to another. Today we learned about the mechanism of heat transfer, specifically conduction. Conduction occurs during actual physical contact between vibrating molecules upon heat application. Typically, through solids that experience a difference in temperature and thermal conductivity. Thermal inertia determines how fast the temperature rises. Conduction can only be transferred in limited quantities and is often localized.
Additionally, using the data that was obtained from the at-home lab kit experiment, a graph was constructed. The unknown time of a theoretical 6-pin dropping could then simply be determined using only the graph. Using this extrapolation method, the 6-pin was found to drop at 58 seconds. Thus, by extrapolating the graph, fire investigators can use this as a method of determining the time of damage and distance of certain items from the heat source at the fire scene.
That's all for today. Case closed.
Document analysis is a branch of forensic science that refers to the scientific examination, comparison, and analysis of documents in question to establish the authenticity of forgery, to uncover the alterations or deletions, and to determine the authorship based on handwriting, text, marks, and other relative impressions. This analysis uses a variety of scientific techniques and methods such as chromatographic and spectroscopy techniques for deriving compositional profile of pen inks and paper. Thus, by comparing the profiles of question and non-inks, we could determine if the suspect could have prepared the question document. It is also important to emphasize here that forensic document examiner is different from graphologists. The former aims is also to analyze the question documents for solving a crime case, whereas the latter attempts to identify the character or habit of a person based on their writing. In today's activity, we will focus on ink analysis, which is a very simple yet important technique in this field. Ink analysis can provide important forensic evidence in an investigation where a particular document is alleged to have been tampered with in some way in order to change its original wording. For your information, for example, analysis of the ink on a check may reveal that it has been altered to increase the amount of money. Alternatively, it can provide the police with an indication of the type of pen and ink used to write the ransom demand in a kidnapping case. It may also even be possible to provide the police with the name of the possible brand of the ink that is being used. For your information, different types of pens have different ink composition. Bear that in your mind. However, all of these pens have one thing in common, which is they all use dyes or pigments or mixture of dye and pigments to give the color. Pigment is not different from dye that it cannot be dissolved. Hence, only dye-based pen inks can be analyzed using liquid chromatographic techniques. Liquid chromatographic techniques includes TLC, HPLC, and UPLC. The dye will be separated when it travels along the solvents through a TLC plate or HPLC column. To put it simply, this is how ink chromatography works. In order to achieve the desired pen ink color, the manufacturers often include more than one type of dye into the ink formulation. Each of the dyes can have different molecular structure and weight. When they are traveling along the plate or column, separation occurs that heavier compound will travel slower than the heavier one. Eventually, the mixture is separated into separate components of which will be seen as separate bonds in the TLC plate. Thus, the heavier dyes will separate out first and move more slowly while the lighter dyes keep moving faster up the paper, creating the tie-dyed or wash-out effect known as color bands. Let me share with you about a famous case that happened recently relating to this topic.
which is in January 2020, our former Prime Minister, which is Najib Abdul Razak's signature, is said to may have been forged in a key piece of evidence in his RM42 million SRC International SDN BHD. So, in order to identify whether the signature is genuine or not, the forensic scientists will carry out handwriting analysis, including the ink chromatography analysis, to provide the evidence in solving this case. Hence, today, we will be sharing with you on how to do the ink chromatography at home in the simplest way possible. It's gonna be fun! To do that, we are going to solve a hypothetical crime. So here is our case. A dead body was found in a room shared by two students. Near the body, a ransom note was found written with "I quit" in blue-colored pen ink on a piece of white A4 paper. In the process of gathering clues, a pilot PP1 artifact blue pen was found in the crime scene with the victim's fingerprint on it. So now, you might think that this is a suicide case, is it? But let's not jump into a conclusion yet and find evidence to solve the case. Nevertheless, one more Faber-Castell Eco-Gel blue pen was seized from the suspect, who was the roommate of the victim at the crime scene. As a forensic scientist, you are required to analyze all these two pen samples to determine the matching ink source with the one deposited on the ransom note, which is the question document.